Gareth Morgan, thanks for talking with me today. You've started a new political party, the Opportunities Party. Why?
Well, I mean, I've been in this public policy space for a long time, Brian, since, early 80s. And what I've noticed over all those decades is the gap between best practice policy and what the policy advisors are telling or advising governments to do and what the politicians are actually doing has got wider and wider. And that's quite frustrating when, you know, the policy advisory research community is all evidence-based and, you know, totally objective and trying to further the national well-being and so on. And you see I think it's changed from political pragmatism to political expediency, what we're seeing. And I mean, the results are pretty clear. Not all boats are rising. And I just don't, philosophically, I don't think you can sustain prosperity unless it's on a foundation of fairness.
At a personal level, are you concerned about inequality and those sorts of things?
Totally. Yeah, totally. I mean, and now, you know, we've got a whole generation of young ones who I think are looking at a future that's so much bleaker than mine was in the 70s. I mean, when I, you know, was a kid in that, I worked in the bush, I funded myself through universities, no fees to pay, of course, so, you know, hurdle wasn't that high. But there were jobs everywhere, right? And it was good money, and I was away, and you know, I graduate, and even graduates got paid, you know, really well. All of that's gone. I mean, these guys now are in casualised work. The wages are crimped. The accommodation costs are coming up underneath them. No wonder we've got the highest blooming youth suicide and mental illness and all these bad indicators in that particular cohort. I don't want my grandkids going into that world. So.
You're not standing candidates in particular electorates, you're going for the party vote, is that?
Well, primarily the party vote, but we will have about 15 electorate candidates as well. So we've announced, I can't quite remember, but I think we've announced about 10, we've got another 5 in the next week, and then we'll shut it off.
And are you at the top of the top list? Are you going
to the list, yeah.
Yeah, so you will go into Parliament if you get your 5%?
Yeah. Or if we're actually, the way the system works, Brian, if we get a seat, and then we're, you know, what's that word, coattailed, which I hate actually, but that's the rule, those are the rules at the moment. But yeah, primarily 5%.
And do you have preferred coalition partners?
No. From day one I've declared that we'd stay on the crossbenches and we'd give confidence and supply to whoever the government was asked to form the government, if it's up to them of course, if they need us. But in return for confidence and supply, it's very simple. We'd say, well, we've got 15 policies here in this integrated set. How many of them are you going to give us? And then, let's say, just for sake, whoever it was, National Bloc or a Labour Bloc, I don't care. It's policy that is all I'm interested in. Let's say they said, well, you can have 4, Gareth, if you give us confidence and supply for the term. Okay, done deal. So then all we'd focus on is getting those 4 policies in place by the time we go again for the next election.
Which 4 would they be?
Well, that would be open to negotiation, so I can't. I mean, but I can tell you what the priorities for us are. By far the biggest one is tax reform, by a mile. Because, I mean, effectively, Brian, I've been on for the last 20 years an effective tax rate, if I take the tax and divide it by my income, of 10% a year. There is no way that a wage earner can ever get that tax rate. So not only is that unfair, I'm an economist, right? I look at it and I say, well, actually, that's really holding the economy back because I go and invest where the tax break's biggest as opposed to where the wealth creation's biggest. That is not a way to run an economy. So on all measures, it's a terrible thing for us to have, so I'm going to smash that.
Get that. Politically, there's a problem here, though, isn't it? It's a similar problem for the public for New Zealand First, which is that a vote for top is a vote for uncertainty. We don't know what government we are going to get if we vote for top. Many people might not want to see the continuation of a national-led coalition, regardless of what your negotiations with them are. Do you see that as a problem?
Well, I mean, from my world, my world is not left, not right, but what works. So I don't actually care who I'm working with, and the real measure is how many of my policies can I get through. So, You know, the Nats, I think, have shown themselves to be incredibly flexible in order to stay in power, and so is Labor. You know, it's funny what these career politicians, how, you know, malleable they actually are when it matters. I mean, John Key was the master of this. So I don't care if it's the Nats or if it's Labor, you know, as long as we get progressive policies in place. And both parties have actually said to me privately, they love me. They love me because I'm bringing in pretty radical stuff, which we've got up there, that no one else is prepared to do, lest they lose votes. I've got no votes to lose, right? And I sort of make this stuff respectable. So my worst scenario is I get nowhere, but these sort of policies that we need, like the UBI, that we need, are in the conventional conversation. That's the worst scenario.
So, just turning to policy now. The unconditional basic income is a major plank in your proposal.
Huge.
Right.
Yeah.
Just talk me through it. What is it? What is your end game for it?
Right.
And how would you plan to roll it out?
Okay, so we've, what is it? Unconditional basic income. So everybody gets it, whether they're in work or not in work. Even if they're not intending ever to be in paid work. They might be bringing up kiddies or looking after elders or looking after the community, they get it as well. That's the end game. We've already announced it for, obviously the oldies already get it in the form of New Zealand Super, they're over 65. We've announced it for the the families with children under 3 because they're the most prone to poverty, that's what the data tells us, and we've announced it for the 18 to 23-year-olds because they're the ones, the group I talked about a bit earlier, that are really in stress now, trying to move out of the nest and stand on their own 2 feet. So it's a staging process. I mean, I'm pretty pernickety about funding this stuff, so I've got to find the money for all of this, and I've got the money for that amount of it, but eventually we'll get it for everybody.
We'll just stop there for a moment,
Yeah.
because you've gone through that pretty quickly, and one of the things is that you say that the over 65s will get the to $10,000.
Yeah.
And then the rest will be means tested.
Yep, totally. So that's the same, and the reason I did that, I mean, we've already got universality with New Zealand Super. That was the Muldoon bribe, the biggest election bribe we've ever seen, 42 years ago. We still haven't recovered. I've got no qualms about it, apart from the level of it. It's too high. It's for a UBI. UBI can't be as high as the minimum wage. It can't be anything like that. Otherwise, there's a moral hazard.
So you're going to take that money and give it to the 18 to 25 year olds.
So I halve New Zealand Super for the richest half of superannuitants. I mean, a guy like me, I get it next year. I'll just buy a motorcycle with it. You know, my friends just go to Fiji with it.
Yeah, but a lot of people won't, Gareth. They're not as wealthy as you are.
So they get it because they're means tested for it. Everybody gets the 10, and then the second part's means tested. Now, if I do that, what I find is I get $3 billion a year I'd save. That money goes to where the actual biggest poverty crisis is, which is these families with young kids. So they get that $3 billion basically. I'm just trying to make this thing fair, but the major driver for a UBI, and you hear it all the time from people like Mark Zuckerberg or, you know, Elon Musk of Tesla, is, and they're screaming at governments to bring in this UBI sooner rather than later, and the reason is they're going to destroy jobs on a scale that we have never seen. No truck drivers, no bus drivers, no courier drivers, couriers, you know, no taxi drivers and no shop assistants. Nirvana for an economist, and Keynes was big on this stuff, the machine does all the work. You and I sit on the beach. The problem is, how do we get the income from the owner of the machine to you and I, because surfies have to eat, right? That's what a UBI is about. So it's to give people some sort of level of protection. We do it already for health and education, why not income?
Well, just a couple of things to unpack on that. Economists also look for elegant solutions. They like the simplest solution. Your solution is actually going to involve a lot of administration in the means testing. In 1991, when a means test was put in on superannuation, it generated an army of accountants and tax advisors who would advise you how to get round this thing. Isn't this going to create more administration?
No, got computers now, which makes a big difference. And I suppose I could respond to you by saying, well, what would you rather have an elegant solution for and giving people, taxpayers, money who don't need it, or sold property.
Well, let's think about that. You're not going to means test young people.
To the 10,000. I'm not going to means test old people to the 10,000 either.
Right. Okay. So Lord gets 10,000, and
everybody gets it. That's the beauty of being a citizen of New Zealand. Same as everybody here gets, including Lord, gets free health and free education. Same.
Let's move on to another area of this taxation. I think you and I are on the same page, and a number of people are on the same page, that one of the issues in New Zealand is that you can create wealth through owning property. That's one of the major ways in which but the issue is, what do we do about that? And if I understand your policy correctly, you're going to tax people for living in their own houses.
I'm going to tax wealth, same as they do right across Europe. And, that's what I'm going to do, because, since I came into money, Brian, I can't believe how easy it is to make money if you've got money. It is unbelievable for a guy that's used to, being self-employed or being on wages. I go to bed at night and I wake up in the morning richer. The biggest risk to my wealth is when I'm awake, right? Because I might make a decision on it. Now, I'm a capitalist, so I don't mind that stuff. What really gets me down, gets my goat though, is when I look at my tax rate on what I make, and I compare it to the tax rate of a salary and wage earner. So my tax rate is 10%, theirs on average is about 25%. That's not only unfair, it means that I invest where the tax break is biggest as opposed to where I create the most wealth or economic output, which is that's low productivity is what that means. And so I just buy houses, as we all do.
Well, but not every 65-year-old is, or above 65-year-old is as wealthy as you. They go to bed at night knowing that their house is going up in value, but they're cash poor. They're actually not got an income. Yeah. How is this going to work for people who haven't got an income but have a house that, through no fault of their own, is going up and up and up?
So over 65, they get taxed. They pay the wealth. They get charged the wealth tax, but they don't pay it. So what that means is the IRD just takes a mortgage on their property, and it's rolled up, and they pay it when they cark it.
So why not just have an inheritance tax?
Well, same thing. It's an estate duty.
Why all of this kind of tax you when you're in your house?
Yeah, because if you tax it on one event, either the sale of a house, capital gains tax, or an inheritance tax, what you do is you're distorting still the year-to-year decisions. I'm taxing far less, but every year along the way, so that the savings and investment decisions aren't distorted. Very, very important for...
I'm not sure I follow that. You have to explain it to me, because it seems to me if I sell my house and I make a profit on it, and you can tax me on that, and then you can also tax my children for passing it on to them.
Yeah, but that's an event that might happen once in your lifetime or twice in your lifetime. If you and I both got a couple of $100,000, let's just say, and you put it in the bank, and you get taxed on that return. I buy a house with it, good old days. Actually, I was in Gisborne last night. The average house there is $240,000, so I nearly buy a house in Gisborne, right, with 200. So I get a roof over my head for that same year. I'm not taxed on that. Grossly unfair. Nuts. That's the bit people don't understand. They're trapped in this world of capital gains, as opposed to, I get technical here, imputed rent.
So what do you say to the person who says, okay, as someone said to me last night, I've worked hard for my house all my life, it's where my savings are for my retirement. It's not about being an investor, it's actually trying to look after myself and my retirement. Now you're going to say to them, okay, we're going to tax you, you can put it off to when you die, but some people are going to get pretty grumpy about having worked all their lives for something that you now say we'll have a lot of that.
Okay, so let's say you bought your house at, I don't know, 1970. You paid $200,000 for that house. It's now worth over $1 million. You haven't worked hard for the over $1 million at all. It's been a complete windfall. You've ripped off, actually, the wealth of the rest of the country.
No, probably. Some people probably started with nothing, bought a house, did it up, did another one, worked hard, did it up to get to the house that's now worth $200,000.
They wouldn't have behaved like that if house prices hadn't been going up and up and up anyway, irrespective of what you're doing them up. That's a windfall, and that's due to a loophole in the income tax system. It's completely wrong. Look, I'll tell you something. I've got a friend, Wilhelm, from Switzerland, and he was out here in February. He's quite rich, and over the month of February, he bought 4 sheep stations in New Zealand. He buys them like you and I buy shoes, right? I said, you're not even a farmer, what are you doing this? He said, I cannot believe this place. He said, in Switzerland, I pay tax on those funds each and every year, no matter where they are. I come out here, I put them in property, no tax. He said, it's a tax haven, it's even better than that, because it keeps going up, because you're all doing it. Well, and now I'm a Category A migrant. Because I'm rich, you think I'm a great addition to your society.
Well, isn't that part of the problem? Here is a guy who's bringing capital flow into the country, buying up property, and the domestic economy, people can't earn enough in the domestic economy to buy a house. What are you going to do about foreign purchasing of houses?
But you understand,
I understand
the issue, right?
Yes, I understand.
Yeah, so he pays, instead of 1.5% of the value of the of his wealth a year in tax, he pays 3%.
Yes, but if I go back to I understand it, but if you go back to my question, isn't he creating a problem for us in 2 ways? One, he's bringing in capital and has got funds that New Zealanders can't get hold of. Two, he can actually just buy these properties over the phone from the other side of the planet.
Yeah, well, I can't quite follow it. I mean, he can't take the land with him, so he's only a leaseholder.
No, that's
like
not,
the same as all of us.
That's not the issue.
Can't go anywhere.
No, let's forget about the farmer for the moment, and talk about a house in Auckland. A foreign investor buys a house in Auckland with money from overseas.
Yeah.
This pushes house prices up.
Totally.
And which means that people in the domestic economy who can't earn that, their wages are far behind that. Yeah. What are you going to do about foreign investment?
They pay twice the tax rate we do, and that means I can drop your taxes.
So you'll charge them twice?
Twice, 3% instead of 1.5% a year. Totally.
You wouldn't put a 15% foreign tax on as they have in Canada?
This is a hell of a lot more.
Is it?
Adding 1.5% of the value each and every year.
So you want
about a 15% one-off.
So this is your thing about you. It's a continuous.
Each and every year. And so I'm not taking $1 extra of tax, Brian. Okay. So when I do that, when I work that tax through, it's an extra $11 billion in tax revenue a year. That's about 1/3 of the income tax take, and so I have to give it back. How would I do it? For example, you'd cut income tax rates by 1/3. So that's a boost to the average salary and wage earner of 8% in their take-home pay. That is massive.
If you wanted to do this and rolled it all out completely, you're looking at roughly $70 billion here, aren't you? You know, if you want to give $20,000 to every adult New Zealander, it's going to be around about $70 billion, isn't it?
Oh, when we get to the we get to the full UBI.
Ultimately.
Yeah. But I'm not. We're not in this turn going to the full UBI. Well, I mean, it was in my book, The Big Kahuna, How You Fund It. It's pretty easy.
But that's almost, I don't know, 80% of our entire tax take, $90 billion, I think is what we spend.
Yeah, but all you're doing is shifting it from one pocket into the other. For example, myself, I get an increase, if we're talking about that, me getting the UBI, I get an increase in tax on the one hand, I give it back, and so that'll go out, and then would come a UBI, so it's neutral. So,
but a lot of the tax money goes into infrastructure, doesn't it? Roads and schools and all of that sort of stuff. Do you think you're going to be able to fund all of the things that we need in the future out of this method?
Well, it doesn't affect the funding available for infrastructure or anything, because all it is a transfer between you and me, say. So,
can I let's go for a moment to young families. A one-child family on the full working for families at the moment roughly gets $164.50. Well, actually gets $164.50. Now, $200 is not much more than that. Are you going to give them the $200 on top of the money they get for working families?
No.
It's a replacement.
If they've got a benefit, to the extent of what are you saying their benefit's $160?
Yes.
Yeah. So no. So for them, it'd be $40.
So they're
already getting a benefit. So it's neutral with respect to beneficiaries. They would, to the extent that their benefit is under 10,000. So they get either 10,000 or their existing benefit a year, whichever is the greater.
Right. So no one's going to lose out.
No.
Right.
No.
So it'll be either or.
Yeah, what I'm trying to do is get away from targeted benefits, or what I call witch hunt welfare, Brian, which is, you probably saw the movie, I, Daniel Blake, which, shows you how you kill people waiting in wins queue. You just keep screwing the criteria until they top themselves. Well, New Zealand's really good at that actually, and getting better in terms of Uber targeting of benefits. So I want to roll back Uber targeting and roll in universality. I can't get rid of all targeting, I'm afraid. There's just so much of it now. Because our labour market's failing, because we're not paying people enough for full-time paid work for them to live on.
Well, I think that's many people would agree that the wages have fallen so far behind things like house prices that it's very difficult.
Yeah.
But isn't there a bit of a contradiction here, though? Because you are going to target older people. You're actually going to put a means test on them. So that's the opposite to what you're saying you're going to do to people on a benefit.
And the reason for that is because the superannuation, New Zealand superannuation, as everybody will tell you, is unaffordable in terms of, because of the numbers coming behind the baby boomers. That's because they're the ones who pay the bill, not us. And if you want a UBI, it's got to be fair for everybody. You can't have one category of citizen getting no questions asked, basically a UBI that's double the size of everybody else. What the hell's fair about that? I mean, I keep telling you, I don't need it. None of my friends need it, all right? So some people do need it. So if they do need it, they get it. But otherwise, they just get the universal part of it, 10 grand, same as anybody else. And I can use the money to alleviate poverty. You like that, don't you?
A lot of people who are 65 plus do a lot of social good in the community. Voluntary work that we couldn't actually, the society would fall apart if they stopped doing it.
Agreed.
And they're going to feel, some of them are saying they feel punished by being in this position with what you're proposing.
I just think they don't want to pay. They're thinking of themselves. They don't want a fair tax system, is what you're telling me.
No, I don't think that's what they're saying. I think they're saying is that you want to tax them year after year after year. They would be okay with an inheritance tax, one off, say, 30% even. But if they live for a long time, they may lose their entire property and have nothing to hand over to their children.
Totally.
And you think that's fair?
You better get your portfolio management right, hadn't you? In terms of, how much you build in each asset class and how long you live, really. It's nothing really changes.
So you think that people should be investing in other areas?
Oh, they will as a result of this. So the money will no longer all go into housing, which is what our biggest problem here has been. But you and I are both children of that era. So for you and I, the baby boomers, this is, I don't know, like something out of Frankenstein. We're really struggling with it. But my point to you is that most of the world has a wealth tax. I gave you the example of the guy coming in. What you and I think have grown up actually, thanks to Muldoon, as normal is not normal. And look at what it's doing. If I take Germany, right? Germany's a hell of a lot more prosperous country than this one is, right? It's gone incredibly well. It has, until the migration thing hit them, it had no, for 40 years, increase in its house prices over income. Look at New Zealand.
They had long-term leasing arrangements as well,
totally.
which we don't have.
But that's part of the policy.
But we used to have it. It was called state housing.
Yeah, but we did. I agree with that as well. But there's no silver bullet here. The whole thing is a package. And what I'm saying is, when I bought a house, it was Joan and I bought our first house. The average house price 3 times the average income. It's now 8 to 15, depending on where you live in New Zealand. There is no way this next generation coming is going to be able to own its own house. Even if I stop the house price inflation today, we're going to have probably 60% of our people being long-term tenants, which I have no issue with, as long as we reform tenancy law, which we have to protect them. So that is the European model.
I'm not sure I buy it. I understand it, and I agree with a lot of it, that there is an intergenerational problem. I'm not sure that you solve the problem by bashing one generation against the other. Now, it does seem to me, as I listen to you, that you have a somewhat elitist view of what over 65s are like, that they're going to be able to work the stock market or make investments in this, that and the other that you're capable of. But, many people, this is the thing they understand.
There's two things about the over 65s. Firstly, there is no cash flow influence whatever from this, getting this tax, closing this loophole on them. So they had no change in their cash flow year to year. Secondly, even though we're halving the New Zealand super, if they need it, which some certainly do, which is the group you're talking on behalf of, they get it. Actually, they get a bit more. So I can't see the problem. Because the only guys I'm bashing, to use your thing, are ones who don't need all of the New Zealand super. Wow. They can join with all the other New Zealanders to hop through these targeted welfare tests, see how they like it.
Well,
you see what we've done? We've feathered our own nest, and yet for these other groups, we're saying you have to jump through all these hoops, and these hoops are getting harder and harder, causing the mental illness, causing no end of social problems, while we sit over here, a generation of baby boomers, born with its head in a trough, still with its head in a trough. Now, what I'm saying to you is not everybody of your and my age thinks like this. When I go to retirement homes and talk to people and point it out, they say, they actually get really upset when I talk to them like this. They say the most important thing in our lives are our grandchildren, not ourselves. So that's different to the view that you're giving me.
No, I'm not giving you a view, I'm giving you an argument.
Well, you gave me a case, right? Yeah. And so that would be my answer to that case.
Well, the answer to the case is interesting because I'm not sure that this is a vote winner.
Oh, well, I don't care. I'm just doing what's right.
Okay, well, but will you get a chance, do you think?
I don't know, actually. Well, whatever. We're up to 2 or something at the moment. I think we'll get 5.
I'm totally with you on the issue of having to solve this problem of wealth being accumulated through property. I'm just not with you on the idea that you could lose 100% of your property if you live long enough.
Well, you'd never get kicked out of the property.
No, you wouldn't get kicked out of the property, but you would have nothing to pass on to your relatives.
So you don't lose it, do you?
No.
Your children lose it.
Your children use it. And do you think that's fair?
Fine. I don't have a problem with that. I don't believe in inheritance anyway. I actually believe in equal opportunity.
Very interesting. Talk to me about education.
Okay, so there's preschool, there's school, and then there's tertiary. So we've got policies in each, which are quite different in each area. So I'll do school, because that's the main one. On school, it's less testing, more teaching. Rationale for that is 90% of the testing done in New Zealand schools on children is totally unnecessary. When you talk to the teachers, they need to test Johnny and Jenny to make sure that they're travelling along. But that's about 10% of the testing. So what the hell are we doing the other 90%? We're doing it to satisfy the vanity of these parents and the insecurity of these parents who are trying to build children in a mould that they never made themselves. Their inadequacy. So we need to get these sticky beaks out of the education system so we can actually educate, as opposed to wasting all of this resource. So I want us to go the Scandinavian model, is what I'm on about in that.
I would agree with you, and I've made programs about this. The other area that is why all the testing gets done is to supply data, junk data, to the ministry so that it can try and prove that it's done good or bad. Would you depoliticise the ministry?
Please. Yeah, totally. And also get rid of tomorrow's schools and go back to yesterday's schools. Because all the evidence tells us when, because it's educational apartheid, that when you start busing kids across town or whatever, that the ones that get moved to the decile 10s don't do any better than they would have otherwise, right? Because, of course, most of their education's coming from the home anyway. It's that sort of family that does that. But by God, it hurts the residual school, the ones left behind who suddenly don't have the resourcing, either in sometimes intellectual, but sometimes money, whatever time, of a fully balanced community. Basically, it's the poor parents are left to suck the salve here. Well, so I hate that stuff.
In the documentary I made about education, I did go to Finland, and I went to America, and I went to a variety of other places, China. And a light, centrally administered education system seems to be the way to go. I mean, we're duplicating administration right throughout the system, and that's a waste of money, but it also has generated a system of rich and poor schools. And in a public education system, there ought not to be rich and poor schools.
This is a hangover from that sort of Alan Gibbs era. what he did to cheese, remember? That the hospitals weren't allowed to talk to each other, no collaboration, so you could have an empty x-ray machine, I could have mine queued up, and I wasn't allowed to ring you up and say, hey, would you like some of mine? Because the Commerce Commission would have us both in court. That was Alan Gibbs, right? Competition between public health providers. We've got more or less the same thing in education. We've dealt with the health, we haven't dealt with the education.
Well, it was disastrous, really, because teachers, I was a teacher in the 70s, before Tomorrow Schools, and we used to share quite naturally. In fact, you got brownie points for sharing because, somebody had a good idea and then you would go and talk to another school or there'd be and then it became very competitive. Now they've had this wonderful idea that maybe we should have centres of groups of schools getting together to share ideas. Well, we used to have it. It was right throughout the country. I do think, my personal view is that we should be depoliticising education, going back to a Director General with regional boards and things, input. So in health, what would you do?
Health, the main thrust in health is more prevention. So we did a study on health a few years ago and published a couple of books on it, and what we found was that you get 4 times the return if you invest the dollars in prevention rather than the ambulance and the hospitals. So of course my next question was, what are we trying to prevent? What are these things we're trying to prevent in New Zealand? And of course that led me straight to the whole obesity related.
Well, it's the diseases of poverty
Yeah. So obesity related stuff. So what we're looking to do there, and work in conjunction with the sort of health experts in this area, is we'll classify food, 3, be red, amber, green, tax the hell out of red, and take every single dollar and put it into subsidised green. So there's no income effect on the poor.
What about GST? Would you take GST off food?
No, because GST, but I do it another way. I just do it with an excise duty. So GST is a red herring. I just put extra 20% on red food and take all of those dollars, exactly those dollars, and subsidise green food.
You make it sound simple.
It is simple.
But
Technically, it's really simple.
Technically, is it? I mean, who decides what's red food and what's green food, and who decides?
The nutrition people, not me. The nutrition people, they're saying they can definitely classify this set of foods as red. They've got a huge swathe of foods that they can't, so it's amber, so nothing affects them, and then they, of course, they know with whole food what's green.
Just to go back, this will be the last question, but just to go back on the $10,000. You get the $10,000, and if you earn more, do you have to pay back any of that, or do you earn less? Does it taken off your taxes? Is it abated?
You're talking about UBI.
Yeah, go back to that. Okay, so it doesn't. You work more, you earn more. It's tax-free $10,000.
Yes, after tax. Yeah, after tax. Yeah. No, you don't abate it. That's the whole problem with poverty traps. Stephen Joyce goes on and on why, when his reaction to my UBI for the young ones was, oh God, we can't get them to work now. Morgan's going to give them 10 grand, it'd be worse. So what Stephen's telling us, he wants to starve them into paid work. The reality is that for those people, that the costs of going to work, in terms of the cost of going, the direct cost plus the abatement on the targeted benefits they suffer, outweighs the peanut wages that Joyce is paying them to pick fruit. That's the reality of young people today.
But rich kids don't need the $10,000. Their parents can look after them.
Rich oldies don't need it either.
Thank you very much, Gareth.
Okay.